Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar. This is our first of 4 webinars in our series, Reach and Retain. This first one is all about how to create dynamic marketing and greater brand relevance in this fast-changing growth market of sports betting that we're all involved with. We appreciate everybody's attendance. I'm your moderator. I'm Ed Moed. I'm the CEO of HPL Digital Sport. We are a brand marketing communications firm that specializes in the sports betting space. Today's focus will be about how those looking to acquire new users, especially during the NCAA tournament and beyond, can make the brands more appealing to the millions of sports bettors who now exist, and what approaches they should be taking to both acquire users and retain them to become more loyal. It's nice that we have this 4 or 5 day time off in a weird way between the next 2 weeks of the tournament. It allows us to have this webinar, and hopefully this information will be really useful to you from our great guest speakers as you move into what happens next week. Before I jump in, I just want to quickly discuss some of the details of today's event. I want to thank SBC for being our sponsor and partner in this. They've done a great job. As I think you know, it's an hour-long webinar, and at any time you can ask questions through the chat function. I'll make sure to get to many of these questions in the last 20 minutes or so, but I may even look at your questions as we go through it, and the panelists have a good discussion and jump to a few of those questions in the middle of the webinar also. We are also conducting a survey, and we'd appreciate it if you would fill it out, if you could take a few minutes. And once we analyze the findings, we're going to have a report. We're happy to send you those findings. It's about the industry, and it's about opportunities, challenges, and how you're building your brands and your company as this market is growing and going through enormous growth. So that is in the box right next to the Q&A box. And if you get a chance, please fill out that survey. And so with that, let me introduce our 3 distinguished panelists who bring decades of successful marketing and brand building experience within the sports betting and consumer marketplace. I really want to thank them for being here. I'm going to ask each one of them to give their own introductions on their background and what they're up to now. I think they could say it better than, or each one of them could say it better than I can. I'll start with Stephen Astrachan, who's the VP of Marketing at Fubo Gaming. And Fubo, as some of you probably know, had a recent acquisition of Victory Sportsbook, where Stephen was the VP of Marketing. Stephen, I'll let you take it from here.
Great, awesome. Yeah, and I'll keep it pretty brief. I'm Stephen Nashkin, the Vice President of Marketing of Fubo Gaming. Previous to joining Fubo Gaming and ultimately Victory, I was an early employee at PointsBet, where I was the media and marketing director, and helped them get live. Then I joined Victory in July of this year as a startup sportsbook out of Chicago here, and obviously, as Ed mentioned, we were recently acquired by Fubo and formed Fubo Gaming to really bring together the first sportsbook owned and operated by an actual media company. So very exciting times ahead.
Awesome, Stephen. Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Eitan Rosenberg, who is the U.S. marketing lead at 888 Holdings, which is a very popular sports book international, and he leads the marketing efforts here in the U.S. Eitan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Ed. So Eitan Rosenberg, head of U.S. marketing at 888 Holdings. 888 is a big international brand, live in more than 13 markets. In the U.S. right now, we do sports, but we also do poker and casino. And prior to 888 Holdings, I was head of growth marketing at William Hill. Like Steve, helped them sort of launch their efforts in New Jersey, as well. So, been part of the space in the U.S. from its beginnings, and really excited to be here.
Fantastic. And last, certainly not least, I want to introduce Phil Leaf, who is the Senior Vice President of Marketing at Hot Paper Lantern and leads all the marketing and a lot of the brand efforts at HPL Digital Sport, and working with platforms, publishers, and technology providers. Phil, why don't you give some background on yourself?
Yeah, sure thing. Hi, everyone. I obviously, as Ed said, run marketing here at HPLDS. We represent, at this point, scores of different fantasy, DFS, sports betting, et cetera, clients. Prior to HPL, I worked mainly on the consumer marketing side, working with companies like the USOC, Nike, Adidas, Puma to build and drive both like brand building and customer acquisition.
Awesome. Let's jump right in, guys. So the topic at hand, obviously, is this big flagpole event called the NCAA tournament. And whether you are a platform, a publisher, content provider, or anyone targeting sports bettors, you're looking to build users. And hopefully you've had some real success over the last week. Thought we'd start off with a kind of a higher end question just about what companies should be thinking about, to my panelists, as they look to separate from the rest. We see a lot of sea of sameness out there with promo ads and sometimes brands not looking different. Love to hear from you guys on what type of approaches that you've seen and that you think are really important as companies look to build greater customer acquisition, and also looking at the high cost and what's really important. Stephen, maybe I'll jump to you first and see what you want to say on the matter. Sure.
Yeah. Obviously, like you said, it's a super, super competitive landscape with a lot of large players in it, who obviously have a large share of voice, are spending a lot in media and marketing to get their message out there. I think the most important thing to think about when you say, how can we differentiate ourselves, is a lot of times on the product side. You look at the market, and as you said, there's a sea of sameness specifically around what people are bringing to the sports betting offering in terms of the actual space. A lot of the places have platforms where you go, you place a bet, and that's about the totality of what you're ultimately getting from the platform. And I think there's a great opportunity to build a product that's built around, what does a sports bettor really, really want? Not just the ability to actually place the bets, but how can they either, come get more information, right? We're living in the information age. People are not just placing bets, they're doing research on their bets. They want to ultimately watch what they're betting. So I think there's a huge opportunity to build a product that's a lot different than what we're currently seeing in the market, that will allow ourselves to separate, ourselves from the current, as you say, the monsters that are already in here, and it'll really allow people to kind of view sports betting in a different light than how they used to watch it, or how they used to view it, or how they even used to go about making a wager, and what they do to ultimately consider how they might want to either work with a sports book, be on a sports book, or place their kind of sports wagers, and how they go about choosing who they're going to bet with.
Eitan, anything to add to that in terms of what Stephen talked about?
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on with that. I would say I look at it 2 levels too, just to kind of even get rudimentary. From the promotion side, everyone's going to be shouting their offer. I think you have to talk to the users and how they speak, right? At tournament time is all about upsets, all about Cinderella teams. So you need to
We got the pizza.
you need to mention things like yeah, you need to mention things like giving them some parlay boosters, enhanced odds around the Cinderella teams, around upsets, right? Incentivize them to make those kind of bets that they're eager to do, right? Not just kind of shouting the offer, or even what's been going on now, people have been doing what I call a no-brainer offer, where it's like bet $1, get 100 if this obvious thing occurs, which is basically dressing a promo in a unique way. That's not going to work long-term either. So you dress it around what people are talking about. That's the promo side. On the more sort of upper funnel, mid funnel side, from an awareness perspective, the other way to get entry point users in is through the alma maters, right? So obviously, maybe this isn't the right tournament for it, but typically in the tournaments, we have a lot of the blue bloods in them and a lot of the other larger colleges there. And it's a way to get influencers that are previously part of those markets, those colleges, to get that base now excited for the tournament and use your platform as the means to continue to get excited. So there's some kind of outside the box, unique ways to do it that can kind of delineate you, particularly if you don't have, let's say, the product features in order to do so.
And yeah, that's interesting, right? So, and I think a lot of sports books have adopted that, the no-brainers, get bigger and and better at that in terms of what you're offering and more different. And it probably is working during this. Phil, as you think about some of the offers, the promos, and it doesn't only have to be with the sports betting sites, it could be with anything. What are you seeing, and even what you're seeing with clients that can happen and that can be done better in terms of the ways they separate themselves out there?
I think it's two things. One of them, which I think both of you guys alluded to, is just like on the content side and the media side, having something that's just interesting beyond like the news that everyone is shouting. New York Magazine had a great piece yesterday, which could have easily been SponCon by anyone, about who to like root for March Madness. And it was like in their, like fun, cheeky, like voice, and hits a good audience. So coming with something like from a content point of view that is just entertainment lets you kind of break through that like wall of, okay, how am I fighting just like commodity promotion after commodity promotion? You'll still need those, because once you get people into your funnel, you can hit them with the DR stuff. The other is like, what can you do that has because we're already in tournament, like I think the big swings like partnerships, et cetera, are kind of missed opportunities, but you could always think of something really novel to do, like mint an NFT of a winning bracket and give it away as a part of a sweepstakes. Like that would get press, or at least be silly and weird and interesting.
Yeah, and I think just to jump in, based off, couldn't agree with, Phil more here, specifically around the idea and looking at it as a commodity market, right? You think about it, and we're in the crypto, everyone's talking about cryptocurrency and the different things. The sportsbook space right now is really, really treated as if it is a commodity market, and the consumers are commodities within which people are going for. Everyone's offer based, everyone's really, really trying to give promos and really almost pay, not almost, exactly pay people to play on their book. And as a user, you ultimately want something that you're going to relate to, that you want to feel engaged with, and something that you're a product that's superior than what everybody else is using. Bitcoin, for example, I'm going to buy Bitcoin at the cheapest price because Bitcoin's the same whether I'm buying it from from user A or user B. But sports books ultimately need to be a little different and adapt to that. You look at any other CPG brand out there, and maybe, Lululemon would be a good example of a brand that's done it well. They're not paying users to use their product. They're not very heavily into sales. They're not very heavily into promo, but they created a really, really great product, a really, really strong brand, and people are willing to pay, a premium and upscale to actually participate in the product versus, going to products that are potentially cheaper and have coupon offerings and will do everything they can to get you in the door, versus building that, let's say, strong product base, that strong brand base, and then accepting that, you're building a customer base that's going to be with you for a long term.
Yeah, I think really that's like side, right? It's more like fun is not an asset class, and you shouldn't treat it like one. Just treating people as people and entertainment as entertainment, I think, can go a long way.
So give me examples, guys, of, and Phil, you can keep going if you want, of whether it's in this industry or outside, but in this industry, it'd be great of companies that are doing it right on how they're treating their brand and how they're going about the marketing.
Yeah, I think the kind of the obvious one is how the monkey knife fight, like rocket ship happened, right? Like you have, I don't want to call it a commodity product, but it's a very simple product. It's great for first-time users, but then you wrap a brand and a tone of voice around it, and it becomes something totally different.
Yeah, I do want to call out. I know they've talked about a lot in the business, but look, Barstool Sportsbook is interesting in the space. I remember, Dave Portnoy was talking about some pitcher that kept blowing leads. I forgot the name, but they actually created a unique prop for it. Like if he blows a lead, you get this amount back and free bets if you bet on the game. And then anytime that pitcher kind of came up, right, it was like, oh, here we go. Is it going to happen? And they created a lot of buzz around the moment. And that was a way to sort of, get a ton of, engagement going around the event, even around a niche, unique thing. It was a random pitcher. It wasn't like a Class A game by any means. And the product wasn't even that stellar either, but that's a way to get engagement. You really hit that social community around it. and all around really just one event to, making that one little event a huge event regardless of the score just on that user. I think it was a really good example of them leveraging that.
Yeah, they've clearly created a brand, right? Go ahead. I'm sorry, Phil, were you going to jump in?
Oh, no, I think it's a lot of like being really opportunistic with things like that. I mean, again, not to go back to like NFT world, but RotoWire, I think one of the Rotos did like an NBA Top Shot giveaway recently, which is like definitely jumping on something that's, that has novelty to it, and is going to get pickup just because of what it is. Like anything super timely with a little twist to it is, people want stuff that's interesting like that.
Yeah, and I can say firsthand, one of the first things that we did at PointsBet that put us on the map was the Karma Committee. For those who maybe aren't aware or remember, it was the NFC Championship game, and there was a missed call, against the Saints there, and we quickly the next day, refunded all of our bettors, and it actually became a national story, picked up by Comedy Central. I think ABC News, to name some of the other, larger players, ended up actually being nominated for a hashtag award around the campaign. So definitely have seen firsthand where, if you can be quick and timely and deliver something that engages your customer base, how quickly that virality can actually take off.
Yeah. And, one of the things I see out there a lot of in this industry is there's a lot of good organizations that really, you talked about it, Eitan, social engagement, that really understand that. And whether it's how they use their own platforms or it's how they're using their platforms with really great content to engage, they're doing it. And that there are others that it feels like they haven't gotten there yet. Maybe Phil, touch on it a little bit in terms of how organizations should look at leveraging their own social to make marketing better and what they can do.
Sure. I mean, I'm going to take it back to my thesis that people need to have a unique voice that speaks to like their either or both differentiated product and differentiated brand. Like, what is it about your product that is more fun, is superior, is faster, has better odds, whatever, and like dial that up. Or from a brand point of view, like, I don't know, if I see another, head-to-head graphic with two players next to each other, like, I'm not going to notice that. Like, content-wise, a lot of the formats and tropes and stuff have been saturated. So it's, again, like, how do you come up with something that's visually that's visually compelling and differentiated? Like, what is the meme version of your brand, almost? Which means you need to understand what your brand is, or just really lean into product, because that's ultimately that's what people are interacting with.
Yeah.
Social guys. Oh, go ahead, jump in, please.
Yeah, to bounce off what Phil was saying, I look, there's opposite ends here that are both critical, right? There's the product end and there's the kind of branding end. I think right now, everyone's in that fight on the branding end, where it's very hard to delineate yourself on that space, because to your point, it's a kind of a race to the bottom, right? Everyone's shouting the big promos. No one's really, I think, done a great job of aligning with a larger brand theme. The Barstools of the world come to play here only because they built an audience there, and then they molded it into sports betting. But no one else has really started in sports betting and then created a sort of a theme that they want to align with, and then aligns with a certain demo or what have you, right? So then it becomes more now in this stage on the product side. But I think eventually companies have to do both, right? And, you can lean on one for only so long, right? But as an example, I think if you have a really great product out there and it's got good word of mouth, it's going to be strong. But if you really want to take it to the next level and get that entry point user, you're going to have to really establish a brand that could align with your product. And attract that larger sort of bubble there, right? We're still in the first inning of this. And right now, if you look at the Venn diagram of potential sports bettors, it's still in that lower funnel, where it's still exhausting a lot of the DFS crossovers, and some of the people that have done physical or done with bookies, right? You still have that big swath out there that no one's really tackled yet of, let's say, passionate sports fans or people that could theoretically be interested in the space that have gone there. And I think the brand's going to do that first. The product is going to cause them to stick around.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I see on the client side so much talk about the casual fan, the person who could be converted, but you're not going to reach them with messaging that is so like insular or like self-focused. Like Barstool worked partially because they have like Call Her Daddy. Like that is just something with millions and millions of listeners, and it has an audience. So like the culture beyond just the culture of sports is also a vein you can tap into.
And should companies be looking at acquisition with their own organic social beyond paid? Should that be more than we can engage and hopefully make it a branding effort? Is that something that should be an acquisition vehicle with other marketing?
I think maybe acquisition should be a underlying hope of, what a good social looks like, but I'm not sure that if you're going out and building social with the main goal of creating as an acquisition channel, I think you're going to fail. Ultimately people are going on social because they want to feel a part of something. They want to feel like they're getting value out of what you're delivering, whether it be either visual stimulation, whether it be informative. And I don't think those are things that we're necessarily going to see if you go out there and be very, very promo focused, very, very heavy on the actual acquisition side. If you go out and like we've been talking about, go out and build a brand that's really, really strong, people will ultimately gravitate towards that brand. And one way to do that is deliver information that people care about, deliver social content that people find engaging, and ultimately want to go to your channels to view. And then not only do you have people who start to resonate with the brand, they'll share that brand with other people that they think will find the content engaging or exciting, and that's how you start growing the brand. And then ultimately they'll stay around, right? If they like what you're going, they'll constantly not only look for you in the feed, but they'll go out of their way to search what you're doing. So you don't have to now spend continual marketing money on making sure you're on every television ad so that people remember your brand, or sending all the direct response emails to make sure that someone deposits upcoming for the big game, because they're already connected. They're already part, and that's why, like we said, we've seen some content companies do it well, and other content, either companies or other people that are kind of running paid social or even organic social not be able to get the following and reach that they'd hoped for, is because they're trying to get something out of it that social is not really meant for.
On the back of that, go ahead, Eitan.
I completely agree with Steve. I think it's a marathon, not a sprint. And organic social, you're right. It shouldn't have a DR sort of KPI to it. What you do see though is you have to. So there's twofold. There's a lot of different phases of the content, a whole different set of worms there. But the main thing that you need to have there is you have to give information and sort of content that you feel like is going to be sticky, that's causing the user to come back, to Steve's point, and then you're mainstay there. And look, the shortcut is acquisition, right? In theory, that's the idea. If you have the bucks behind you, you acquire that audience and hope it correlates to sports betting if it's not a sports betting audience already. To build it on your own is possible, but it takes I think then the company's got to be ready to invest in a massive team or decent sized team to do that, where they're really topical with it. They kind of know what audience they're going after already, right? And then that goes to the other stage of this, right, where a lot of companies, and this goes back to my agency days, quite frankly, and this is just a classic marketing notion, where a lot of companies want to go after a certain demo, when really you have to kind of look at your data, look at your audience, look at the affinities, and then that's the demo you should be going after, right? Not the other way around. It's tougher to force that, and then you build your content around that demo, right? I think that's a better route that companies should be taking, and versus forcing it. And then social is obviously the place to bring that to life.
Phil, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say where social does play a big part is on the retention end. And that's where this I'm not anti-promo, but they're not going to do everything you want all the time. But if you have a dedicated audience, it's a good way to reach that audience and get them to come back, get them to play. Like, everyone gets all the emails from everybody, but I feel like social following is a lot more selective. And so, if I have like someone, BetMGM giving me a promo and it's in my feed, I'm going to see that and maybe act on it in a way that's not just like, hitting it in some other channel.
Sounds good. Let me. By the way, I want to remind the audience, please fire away on questions as you would like to, and I will start bringing some of those up over the next 10 or 15 minutes. Let's talk about retention, guys, because that leads really nicely into it. That is a challenge for this industry overall. There is, as Eitan talked about, just a giant push all about acquisition. But when this big event is over, and then we're on to regular times and maybe another flagpole event comes, how are you retaining those users? I mean, we have, obviously, people are going to use different sports books based on the odds, based on the products, and they are looking at the brand and the marketing. But how do you keep them coming back when it's not just based on you're giving them a better odds than the other books, basically? Would love to hear a little about that. Steven, do you want to jump in first?
Yeah, sure. I think, and obviously we've talked about product, but I think, you have to have a strong product that's going to make people want to use your product. And then I think it's all about either customizing an experience to them. Obviously, one of the great parts about sports betting is we have so much data on what our customers are doing. We know when they're betting, what they're betting on, who they're betting for, how much they're betting, all those different things. And so being able to custom and tailor a experience to a user is something that would be extremely powerful. So you feel like when you log on to Fubo Sportsbook, you're logging on to, let's say, an app that was built just for you. And anytime, and it's data and all the studies will show that anytime you have the ability to do that, it's extremely, extremely important. And then I think there's other things as well, is giving people a reason to come to the app, not just necessarily to place a bet, for other things as well. Like, for example, one thing we did is have an Action Network integration, where we can provide data analytics and all these different tools to our users in the app itself. So people are going to go out and they're going to read and they're going to learn, and people want to be informed in what they're betting on. But being able to give people a place to do so is going to be extremely important as well. And if we can do that and then also have them in the right mindset to place their bet, that makes it even better. So I think a lot of it is the product. And then obviously from the brand side, having a brand that people resonate with, people care about, and ultimately one day people are passionate and advocates for, is also going to be extremely, extremely important. You see a variety of different companies, and obviously we've talked about Barstool to death, but that's one of the reasons that they were able to launch so well, is people resonated with the brand. So between those two things, I think it's extremely opportunistic, and there's the area to really innovate on what the sportsbook industry currently has, to start providing those things to the customers and be able to really pair, like I said, product and brands together. So once people come onto the book, they stay on the book.
Makes sense. Eitan, thoughts from you?
Yeah, I want to touch further on something that Steve said that's spot on, and something we're trying to do as well. The customization is super key. So I think there's two massive aspects here. The customization needs to be on all levels, right? So I agree, it's coming to the UI, it's saying, it's kind of the Amazon experience, right? People, you bought this, you might be interested in this, right? So seeing the types of bets, up front, the idea of sports is there's a long tail of sports, right? We saw some interesting stat where about 40%, I believe it was about 40% of people that were betting, they preferred to bet on NFL, but then the remaining 60 was this kind of long, extreme long tail where it's all the way to La Liga and some international events out there, right? So if you're able to capture that long tail audience, create customized promos, customizable pushes, CRM offers, right, and things like that, I think you can win that customer on the individual level. That's one aspect. The other aspect is on the product side, and a lot of just normal human behavior is loss aversion, right? If you feel like you built something up, particularly if you have some kind of bonus point system and have a nice loyalty program, right, which has been a fixture in the physical casino space for a long time, but it hasn't really translated super well in the online. I think it's ways to enhance that. that can also be massively successful, right? If someone feels like they've already built this massive rewards program within your book, they're going to be, and then they get more bonuses for, redepositing and things like that, and just making those offers. Again, I know we want to say it for the promos, but making it more on the loyalty side, I think is helpful. And doing things like, missions and things like that, where it's engaging the user to keep coming back and having a little fun outside of just the enhanced odds, the promo boosters, being more clever with your CRM content to keep the user coming back, I think is other ways to delineate and make sure that user is sticky.
It's great. Phil, Eitan brought up two things, CRM and loyalty programs, both important. Companies, some are very good, some are just trying it. Give us your thoughts on what works well based on what you're helping to strategize and execute with companies out there.
Sure. I mean, like Eitan said, anything where you have like points that are in platform and you make them conditional on spending money in the platform is like, that is retention, right? Like that's going to work. I think when it gets a little more interesting, and this touches on my like tapping into the culture, not just sports culture, not just betting culture, is something you saw with, I think it was Super Draft and Caesars, like where play on that app is actually tied into the Caesars loyalty program globally. So you have like people who are engaged with that and invested in it, who you can pull into your gameplay as a way to just like enrich their universe. And you can push people out from the app into something where their loyalty points get them more than just like, a snake eating its tail of one app playing. I always think that cross-platform loyalty programs are always really interesting. Like they never really hit in retail, but I still think there's a lot of potential in the digital world for like a cross-platform sort of normalized loyalty experience. That's like a much bigger project than any one like app, but I think it'd be really interesting.
Well, I think, I was just going to say, I think the exciting, and we talk about cross-platform loyalty, but one of the exciting opportunities here that, that we have specifically at Fubo is the idea that we have two companies built around sports entertainment. And so really allows us to, and I kind of talked about it somewhat on the data side, but we'll know what people are watching and can custom tailor things to that, in addition to what we can see they're doing on the sports betting side. But we can also start to create cross-platform loyalty to create a more holistic sports experience, both from the viewing side, both from the gaming side, and then also work to do other verticals as well, where people consume sports such as merchandising, ticketing, all the fun different things there.
Can't wait to see that as you guys are launching. Actually, I think that'll be great. Go ahead, Eitan. Let me let you jump in as you're going to continue.
Yeah, I think the CRM definitely crosses with cross-sell, right? So, we have a similar thing where obviously a poker and a casino, and cross-sell is critical to really help to help that stickiness of the user. You have rewards for one, really assisting the rewards for the other, right? So, it could be a free-to-play tournament where in poker, where the win is a certain amount of free bets. You get hit a certain loyalty program in sports that then, then is allotted to free spins in casino, right? So that cross is critical. And again, I think every company needs to be thinking that way, because, look, obviously with COVID that just happened, right? The companies that were just doing sports betting or were just really focused on the physical saw a major hole there. And most sports betting companies, not all, have to figure out a way to avoid that, dip in during this season, really post March Madness and really the baseball season where you're not getting NFL, you're not getting college basketball. So you need to have that cross-sell in there that keeps the users engaged. I think daily fantasy and some of the fun free-to-play stuff does that, right? Where people in the past had things around election. FanDuel, I think, did some clever things also around some reality shows, right? That keeps the users sort of engaged during sort of the off-peak, and then obviously use the sports season during the right time to then really convert them, but make sure you have a product that's entertaining 24/7.
I think you guys answered the question, but there was a question from some of the audience. What would you say is the base for a good loyalty program for the players? Is there anything you think we missed with answering that question?
one thing I do want to point out on that, and it's a finance game, right? Steve's obviously very familiar with it. I am as well. It's a constant battle with the people holding the funds of how aggressive you want to be, right? So every company right now, I think, has more funds that are used for acquisition, right? Which is why those offers are greater. Now, there's a lot of deceptive offers out there. There's the playthrough and all that, where they can get around putting out a large offer, but still all the emphasis is on that. There's not enough emphasis on the loyalty aspect, right? The numbers are actually quite small, right? So meaning, like typically most companies, you have to spend at least, it's not more than 1% you're getting cash back, right? And you're seeing it in other places, particularly in credit cards, right? Where when you start increasing that number, it can help from an acquisition and a CRM point. It hasn't translated as much to retail, and definitely hasn't translated to sports betting, where I believe if companies are now able to increase that 1%, get closer to a 5% range, they'll be better off from an LTV, and they'll be able to reclassify the user and maybe can avoid spending all that on acquisition potentially.
Sounds good. There's another question. There's more of a general question. I just wanted to make sure we get to some of these. What are the right ROI tools to be leveraged in the sports bet marketing category that you guys use to make sure you're able to really understand the analytics and get better and convert and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's. Oh, please go for it. Don, sounds like you had something.
No,
I think you're on, Steve. You're good.
All right, then I'll take it away. Yeah, I mean, obviously from our side, there's a ton of different marketing metrics and tools that you can use that are going to measure CAC, measure conversion rates, all the different things from the media side. I think the exciting part or the challenge maybe is even building tools internally that possibly aren't there already. One of the main struggles that we have is the sports book world, or sports betting has been legal in the United States for maybe 3 years, and people are constantly trying to measure what is the lifetime value of a customer, and how do you do that? How do you measure lifetime value of a customer that's been with you for a year? How do you figure out what they're going to be worth over 20 years when the industry's only been around for 2? So working through actually custom modeling with data engineering, data scientists who, can start to look at some of the points that really are indicative of what a customer is going to be long-term, such as how much they're betting on their first actual bet, how much they come in and deposit, how often they bet within their first month, is really the exciting thing, and kind of modeling out those tools. I'd say that they're, all the standard, let's say GTM, Google Analytics, Apps Flyer, or MMPs, or all the various segmentation tools aren't necessarily super industry specific. It's more the tools that maybe people are starting to develop in the back end of how we actually measure the value of the customers and what those main metric points that we can point to and look at, to quickly can we guess in the first 7 days what a customer is going to be worth? And now how do we go about our retention journey, making sure that we meet every kind of need and want that they have, because we know or think they'll be worth X amount, and we can give away, X amount in loyalty to make sure that we stay with them long-term, and we feel confident about that.
Yeah, also to touch on Steve's point, we did a lot of heavy analysis on the customer segmentation and which segmentation is the most fruitful as well, right? So a lot of times, obviously, spot on, you have your data tools to figure out, at what point you need to re-engage to make sure they come back, and then at that point, you're more likely to keep them long-term than if you didn't re-engage at that specific point. But the customer segmentation, I think, is actually really key, right? And some of the things you got to look at is, obviously, you look at LTV by sport, LTV by when you engage with them in the sport. So, in theory, right, someone who's betting baseball, as an example, beginning of the season could be a very fruitful bettor. Why? They can keep coming back. Baseball is also a very good in-game sport. So there's other ways to now increase the revenue from that user, right? So you can squeeze out more LTV there. So that's one aspect is really that customer segmentation. That's on the sport level. Then it's also about where you acquire them as well, and you figure out that bucket, right? One of the things we've also seen is the physical sports bettor. Think about it. If someone has intent to drive 30 minutes to a physical sports book to place a bet, they're probably a pretty good user, right? So if you have clever ways to now cross over your physical users to digital, that's always going to be, a prime LTV play. So marrying those two things is obviously quite critical. And then that could then empower more of your promos and some of the other things you do to now acquire more of those users, rather than go for the one-time bettors, which you have to do, but like your Super Bowl bettors, typically have a lower LTV, right? Because they're only pacing that game, and then obviously, football's not coming back for quite a while. So you have to think that way, I think, as well, to improve companies' LTV. And then you look at the right metrics too, right? So there's a lot of psychology behind it, right? I think gross win is a great metric to look at to keep the numbers around. Every company has different numbers, but keeping that in that 6% or lower range is key. You want to make sure you're not turning this into, we've seen this in online poker in the early mid-2000s, where there was a gold rush of players coming in after Chris Moneymaker, an average person basically won $1 million. But all the sharks came in, right, and people lost their shirts, and the sharks pretty much ate all the fish, right? DFS is seeing something similar, in my opinion, where the gross win is probably a lot higher for the DFS sites, and players are not losing as much. In sports betting, I think you want people to win, lose, over time, and that's a great way in making sure the traders know that and they're pricing it accordingly. So you're keeping a very consistent gross win percentage as well as possible to make sure you have that stickiness of that user that keeps coming back, doesn't feel like they're losing their shirt each time.
Makes a lot of sense. I wanted to touch on one thing, because we have a lot of different people from different size companies, startups, mid-size, some of the big players too. I wanted to make sure that we don't just talk about marketing as it pertains to huge spends. There are a lot of companies, they might be early stage or beyond, they're looking at how can I make a dent, and with a much smaller budget. Maybe it's even under $1 million in terms of what I'm doing, or a couple $100,000. Phil, any thoughts as to how companies with smaller marketing budgets can be successful in what they're trying to do?
I think the best way is to, turn like that disadvantage, you're small, into, let's say small and new versus just like you haven't thrived. You're small and new, you have the agility to make your product something that's really interesting and novel. And that gives you a lot more of a basis to like, and we'll get more traction out of your marketing if it's something that is new, interesting, and good. So you don't necessarily have to like push the huge spends that a sports book would, or a DraftKings, just because they're product equivalent to a FanDuel. So that's one thing. Obviously, investing in brand early on can get you some outsized rewards, because you're not trying to like shift a mentality. You're going to market fresh. Those would be my two biggest points, is like actually make sure that you're bringing something new and interesting to market, which you can do because you're small and agile, or use a brand for a little more excitement and differentiation.
And Stephen, you were with PointsBet when that once upon a day they were a small entity too, and you were there early on with them. And I thought they were interesting as an example of an organization that did a good job of storytelling. Whether it's how they use media to do it from an editorial standpoint, through social, or the marketing that you guys did. Any thoughts from your standpoint as you look maybe at those early days, or entities you see out there who are doing it well?
Sure. Yeah. No, I guess for starters too, we did have, it's not like we didn't have any budget, when we were at PointsBet. Obviously, we weren't spending as much as, let's say, FanDuel or DraftKings, or some of the other larger players, but we did have enough to, reach a sizable audience, which obviously was important for us. And then, it was all about kind of talking and touching about the product differentiators, what made us different. At the time, we also thought there was a different customer or consumer that we could reach, in a different brand voice that we could position ourselves, and really trying to lean into the fact that there wasn't a book currently out there that was catering towards maybe some of the larger bettors. And so that allowed us to go out and find some of the, players that maybe felt that they weren't being quite messaged to correctly, that they were being underserved, either with their limits not being where as high as they needed to be, the book being not catered towards an experience that ultimately led towards higher bet values and things of that nature. So that really helped. And then, being nimble in terms of the way we actually thought about media, really trying to limit spillage and waste. But, if you're coming into the market as it is now with, less than $1 million to spend, I think you're going to have a really, really tough time getting to scale that you're going to need in order to sustain in this business. You can start by really having honest conversations with your consumers and really and if you have to have a product that is super, super differentiated, or an offering that's super, super differentiated. Otherwise, I don't know if there's space for people that are coming in, without that type of funding.
Yeah, to touch on Steve's point as well, it's all about finding that white space. Who is DraftKings and FanDuel and the big players not speaking to, right? And then seeing if that audience has some legs, and then trying to grow within that audience, right? You want to own that segment, right? So as an example, and there are white spaces still, right? There really are. An example is something we're trying to hit on, but I still think there's a white space. There's a lot of foreigners that live in the U.S. that their favorite team is overseas, and no one's talking to that audience, right? No one's talking to them in their language. No one's explaining to them the different interesting betting opportunities. No one's got an influencer for that network, right? So I would look at that's just an audience white space. Phil, to your point, there's also product white spaces, right? Which I think PointsBet hit as well, but there's like that heavy financial trader, right, who's into crypto, who's into the NFTs, who's into these new investing opportunities. How do you get them into sports betting? Now, how do you Robin Hood sports betting, right? And put it in that way. So that's a product element, that's an audience element, but it's about finding that white space. You can't conquer everybody if you're not going to have a lot of budget. It's better to, I think, own a significant audience that's a growing audience or a growing segment that could have pay dividends down the road. And there's a way to do it with smaller budgets. I think you do things more on the influencer route, probably speak to them in the different channels that they're in, try to do more, guerrilla marketing. You infiltrate Facebook groups and post on Reddit and things like that. And you pay people an affiliate model, right? But that's the way to start it out, I think, with a small budget.
That's a really good point. I love what you guys have talked about, because it is important, and the white space is always key. Even if you're a large player, what can you own? Where do you start? Where do you go from there? Or a player with some money. So I appreciate that. Let's just look at, we're knock on wood coming out of COVID, right? And everybody's excited, cautious but excited. In stadium events are going to slowly start coming back. There's an opportunity to do more different types of marketing as we slowly get out of this. There's also a big consolidation. We look at where content and media is coming together with sports betting. Look at Fubo and the job they're doing. Guys, where is this heading in the next year and a half? More states are going to be opening up. What do we see as the opportunities? It might not just be marketing. It could be business, but it could be you guys talking a little bit about where even you see the opportunities with your organizations. We'd love each of you guys to touch on that some.
Yeah, I mean, from our side, I think there's like you said, a huge opportunity to start seeing sports books, and I think we've already started to see it become national players in the actual landscape itself. Both from a media standpoint and from a company standpoint, you're starting to see more and more national partnerships, which you probably wouldn't have seen, about a year ago. And as states become, legal, and more actual people in the United States have the ability to gamble legally on sports, it becomes that much more efficient for people to, enter into those things. You see partnerships with TNT across their broadcasts, ESPN. Obviously, there's CBS. There's a variety of different places where the national picture is now starting to really come into play. And so it's how can you engage those fans on a national level, which is going to be the exciting part. And where we're coming from and where we're thinking about, hey, obviously we raised a lot of money to do so, and say we want to engage fans like no one has ever engaged them before. We want to show people that we can create a product both on a regional scale that's very, very appealing to them, customized to what they're doing, but also has the ability to scale nationally so that you can think about, I can bet here, I can bet there. And really as you actually start to go across the country, and I think we'll probably see maybe 20, 25 states have legal online sports betting, hopefully by the end of 22 here, if not more, that, you'll see people start to travel and be able to take their sports betting with them. I can go from Illinois right now, I can drive up to Michigan and usually have the same account and continue to bet. So it's really working on taking something that was once regional and turn it into a national product that scales and goes as you go as a consumer.
Yeah, and to touch on that, so I think you're going to see a lot more partnerships happen in the next 1 to 2 years, right? And in the following routes, I think brand, content, product, right? Those are going to be the three. Whether you want to expand your offering, you want to attach yourself to now a bigger brand to make a move there, or you need that content funneling in, right? So that's one element. Second element, as states, as you go into more and more states, I think you're actually going to see players who attempt to go national realize they're better suited regional, right? So you're going to see some now players are going to be your national players, and then almost you're going to see your regional players. I see it similar to like QSR, right? Where you have obviously McDonald's and Burger King as your big ones, but you have Jack in the Box, you have a few others that are obviously more regional, right? And I see something similar here because it's going to be dependent on what states you get into. Can you get first in those states? And do you have an audience affinity for the demo in that state, right, in that region? Almost similar to politics. So the smart companies, I think, are going to be the ones, obviously they test it out. They're going to figure out what segments they own more on a regional basis and just double down on those segments and get more from the core there. And then they potentially may merger later down the line, but I think that's going to be the next evolution here.
Phil?
More consolidation, more people, more casual, more mobile, more real time.
That said quick and simply. You almost gave a tagline in that, the way you said it. You see an interesting thing because you have clients that span different categories, different types of offerings, B2B, B2C. Is there anything you're seeing that they're planning for that hasn't been discussed here, or that they're doing to set themselves apart? You don't have to name the companies, but any unique things, whether it's how they're marketing or how they're going about filling a white space?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just going to say, I think the important thing is when you think about offerings and different things like that is, like you said, there's such a diverse range of what people are ultimately betting. Some people bet $5 a game. Some people bet $5,000 a game. So it's really important when you look at the promos that you're giving people once they've already come on the platform, the retention offers that you're giving, that you try not to insult the larger players with an offer that's only catered towards maybe someone who's betting $5, $10 a game, and at the same time not scare off some of the more casual bettors who are betting $5, $10 a game with promo offers or deposit offers that are way too large for what they feel comfortable paying towards.
Gotcha. Phil, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, I would answer similarly. Like, we have our set of kind of like common sports and sports betting user personas that we pull from and develop over time. And like the personalization and CRM and clienteling aspect, I feel like is pretty weak just amongst definitely the startup players, but I think amongst the industry in general, unless you come from a lineage of having that capability, like one of the older or more classic books. So that's, I mean, going into this like post-acquisition frenzy, post like customer acquisition, not the coming post-acquisition frenzy of consolidation that's also going to happen. Then yeah, you need to actually like make the juice worth the squeeze and get what you can out of your CLV and your other retention metrics.
Yeah, well, we only have a couple more minutes. I just wanted to know, are you guys seeing, and maybe you're leveraging any really cool cutting edge types of technologies or things out there in your efforts of conversion or how you're going about using it to reach new audiences? Anything that we can or loyalty, anything worth sharing with the audience in terms of what you guys are seeing out there?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different product enhancement tools we've seen, right? So we bought a company called Spectate. We're going to be transitioning to that new platform. One of the unique features is sort of this concept called all market bets, which, FanDuel has sort of the same game parlay, and everyone's really obsessed with that. But we realize in the sports betting space, you got to give users choice and not force fit certain things. So the element to literally bet on and build your bet on anything under the sun, right? If you have a basketball game, you can bet on this guy over this many personal fouls, this guy playing this many minutes, right? And really just get to this crazy nuanced thing to get that long tail better is key. The other pieces I've seen, this is not from our house, but some other players pushing up is on the social side, right? I think sports betting could really be a community. You see that a lot when you infiltrate a lot of these social networks, Reddit and the Facebook groups, and companies that are able to create either a chat feature or a way for people to engage with each other, or more people betting on one side and then it helps the line, whatever it is. But enabling some social element to sports betting, I think, is going to be a key product feature that some startups are already exploring.
Yeah, on top of what Eitan said, I mean, Discord is huge, and I think that is a great stand-in for a community element because you have people who are already there, they're already participating, and it's cross interest group. And then, esports, I think that's going to increasingly mainstream. So you'll see platforms like Twitch become more and more important in your marketing mix.
Great, guys. We have like 3 minutes left, and I think we've answered a lot of the questions, and I really appreciate all the time you've taken. I hope to the audience that this has been worthwhile. We really have three specialists who have a lot of experience and just offered up a lot of what they see and what they're going through and what companies should be doing out there. So thank you for attending, and we hope we'll be sending out other emails to our next session, which is going to be all about storytelling and how to do that in a real successful way. So hope everybody has a good day, and thank you to everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Bye-bye.
And then before everyone logs off, I just want to mention as well, Fubo Gaming is hiring for a bunch of positions across the board. So for anyone who's currently, in the space or looking to get in the space, may be worth checking out some of those job postings. So thank you.
Fantastic. Important you check it out, everyone. Thanks, Stephen. Everyone have a great day. Take care.
Bye.